Hello, Mark.
Morning, HJ.
Very good to be with you. I was delighted to be invited to join you at a conference of the Grammar Schools Heads Association recently, and I just wanted to follow up a little bit on that and to ask you about your role within the grammar schools sector here in the UK, and then how you think about education in the UK, where it's going, and whether there is space for China and curriculum enrichment in that area. So perhaps if we just step back and talk about you, you're the CEO of the Grammar School Heads Association. Could you tell us a little bit about what that role is and what is your leadership and your educational background?
Sure. Well, the Grammar School Heads Association is a membership organisation. So we represent the head teachers of the 163 state selective schools in England. So we look after their interests in terms of relationships with government and also with the exam boards and other sorts of non-governmental organisations. And also we run our own conference programme and professional development for heads. So that's effectively our role. We're not a pressure group, we're very much a group that represents the interests of the members. Sometimes we get confused with a pressure group who wants to expand grammar schools, which is a controversial subject, but we're not that. We're very much there for our members. My role up and my background is having been a head of a grammar school myself for 15 years, followed a course of being a history teacher and then in senior leadership in a number of different schools. And having given up headship in 2018, I'm now concentrating on this role as education consultant and working for the Grammar School Heads Association, which I very much enjoy.
Brilliant. Well, I was really inspired by meeting some of those heads at the conference. It was held at Pate's Grammar School, which seriously had a feel of great inspiration and aspiration walking around, and the head there was really on fire and really wonderful to have the chance to exchange ideas and best practice. And actually I was blown away by how much work the grammar schools are doing with primary schools. So they tend to be a real hub for educational growth and opportunity in the areas in which they operate, which perhaps is not part of the narrative that normally hits the headlines. And maybe you've got something you'd like to add to that.
No, you're right. It's not part of the normal narrative. We get pigeonholed as being sort of in our ivory towers, really, and not getting engaged with the community. And in many cases, that's very far removed from the truth. So many of our members do an awful lot of work with primary schools and the wider community. 8 of our schools are teaching school hubs, so they're actually running all the professional development and often teacher training as well for the whole county in which they're situated. So we're very much an integral part of the broader education system.
So really good work going on there. There's a lot of challenge going on in the education sector. We all feel it with, family people, and through COVID, just hearing about schools suddenly catapulted into having to take on a role and quite different, and online learning and so on. And then also with parents at home suddenly having to take more of an active role in their own children's education. I think we realised how much teachers and schools do for us. And it's not just a case of, oh, well, they're going in and they're learning, but actually the whole pastoral care and so much more that schools do. But what do you think the needs of education for our young people today in a world that is quite polarized, lots about AI and future of work and what will it be, and cost of living, and young people today have got huge challenges. They seem to be less resilient perhaps than previous generations, or maybe that's just us sitting in our ivory towers thinking that we're much better prepared for change. But where do you think the gaps are, and how we need to support young people for a future that is actually not really very clear, not very stable?
Well, I think in a way, our generation had it a lot easier because there weren't the issues of social media and opinions floating around, that you can't get away from. And most importantly, the world in which you and I grew up was one which was, in a way, sort of almost fixed in its political polarity. You had the Soviet Union and you had the United States and the Cold War. Now we live in a world which is multipolar. You've got a huge amount of uncertainty about our place in the world as a nation, and the West's place in the world, which was much less unclear, perhaps when we were growing up in more sort of adversarial East-West terms. So you've got all that going on, and at the same time you've got this massive technological and societal change happening. So it's not really surprising in a way that young people find this world confusing, difficult to cope with. So I think in terms of education, what we need to be doing as schools, as educators, is to provide an education which helps young people to thrive those very uncertain conditions. And to me, that's about developing adaptability, because people don't stay in one job for their whole life like they used to. Jobs will change. Jobs may not exist that people will be doing in only a very short period of time. So it is about resilience. It's about adaptability. It's about picking up those habits of communication, collaboration, which will enable young people to thrive. And by thrive, I don't mean just sort of thrive sort of financially. I mean prosper personally, as well as in terms of providing for themselves and their families in the future. So I think it's a really difficult job, and I think we can do that. The exam system, if you like, sometimes works a little bit against some of that. So I think the best schools are the ones that manage to find a way of helping youngsters develop those habits which will serve them well, whatever the future holds, while at the same time getting them the results they need, and at the same time exposing them to some of the best learning and thinking and culture that society has to offer. Because for me, the other great purpose of education is to help you find your passions in life. So you have to expose people to a wide variety of different things in the hope that one thing might become the thing that for them is really going to perhaps become a career, but if not a career, then a lifetime passion and interest which will deepen over time and give them enormous pleasure and satisfaction out of life.
That's a really fantastic and extensive answer. Thank you. Certainly for me, going to China for one day, admittedly from Hong Kong, where I'd been for 10 days prior to that, when I was 15, just gave me that spark that set me off on a whole lifetime trajectory of working with China. That was where I found my interest. And it was a case of, well, how come I haven't learned about China or Asia in the whole of my educational career to this point, so to age 15. I did do history, and I know you're a historian, for A-level, but even in my A-level curriculum, there were 2 pages in my textbook about the Opium Wars. And but it was essentially, British, a very British emphasis. And arguably, we lost out, I think, on just thinking more broadly about the world, and just picking up on your point about what's out there and cultural input. So you very kindly invited me to this conference. You asked me to talk about China, my specialist chosen subject. What was it that you thought I could add to the heads conference and add by talking to your heads about China?
Well, I think because it's a subject which is very easy for people just to think it's a bit put in the too difficult box, because there's so many pressures on schools. And you've got the national curriculum. Every newspaper, it says, schools should be doing more about X or Y or Z. So you're under constant pressure to try to do more, and the amount of time is finite. So it's a matter of trying to select content, if you like, areas of knowledge and experience which are going to try and deliver your vision for the education you want to provide. So I think China is one of those areas which it doesn't really get much of a look in that debate very often. I think the current government don't really want to talk about it because of political challenges it poses and economic challenges it poses. But I think in terms of helping youngsters to understand the world as it's going to be in the next 50 years, I think China is an extremely important part of that. And I hope that by inviting you to the conference, it might encourage one or two of my head teacher colleagues and senior leaders to engage with that agenda and perhaps find a way of bringing that to the attention of their students.
Well, I was very grateful for that opportunity. And as you may recall, I talked about my title was People, Power and Potential, the impact of China on young people today. I had a thought in my head, actually, if China was a student, one of the pupils that came across maybe into year 8 or 9, so age 12 or 13, so not quite maybe at the normal starting time of the general cohort who come in, certainly secondary school level, usually at the age of 11. So it comes into the school a bit shy, not quite sure about the culture of the school. Other friendship networks have already been established. Perhaps the language skill is not quite there. Bit of bullying going on. Very focused pupil, but needs a lot of help. But suddenly, by the time this pupil leaves, it's absolutely taken advantage of every single opportunity that's going on. Language skills completely developed, aspirational, really committed, very diligent. And it's a pupil that you're really, really proud of. Now, if that were a pupil, you would be delighted, goes off and does amazing things. And I think that China is a bit like that. China has come late to the international institutional table. We really recognized and saw it for what it was at the Beijing Olympic Games, I think, in 2008. That was when the West suddenly thought that it came into their consciousness, goodness me, here's this country that we've been dealing with. We've been getting lots of goods from China, but it's not really been on our radar. And suddenly there was China. And in those intervening years, China has become this incredible force with so much impact and influence. But we don't have that same response to it. And as you say, I love that expression, you just use it, kind of in the difficult box. So how do we, if we are in education, how do we tackle that? How do we, when there are so many pressures on time and the curriculum and what we've got to teach children, enable them to see and contrast and challenge the sort of the popular view about China, and encourage maybe some of your colleagues, as you said, to say, let's give this a go. What kind of support, input, resources might one need? Is it literally here you are, here's a set of resources and go for it? Or could it be something along the lines of what we offer, that is, well, we'd come into your school for a day and work with a cohort of your pupils and just hope that 2 or 3 might just say, wow, that is the thing. Gosh, I really want to learn more about that. I'd like to go and learn some Mandarin, or I want to go to study in China. Or where do we take this? How do we, your colleague who stood up and did a terrific talk at the conference at Pates was talking about nudge theory. And I really like that idea that actually it's no good just not doing anything about it because it's too difficult. So how do we move ourselves then from, okay, it's difficult, but you're a historian and your colleagues are, you're all about teaching and encouraging children to challenge and to question. So how do we do that?
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy because, as we said, the space is so crowded. But I think it's about putting some facts in front of youngsters that will really make them sit up and think. And you did that extremely well in your presentation. I heard another one the other day, actually on a podcast, which was, forgive me, I can't remember the exact sum of money. It's a very large sum of money. The sum of money that America spent on fighting wars in Iraq and Afghanistan is about the same over the last 20 years, is about the same as the amount of money China has spent on the Belt and Road Initiative in the last 20 years. So whereas America has come out with pretty much nothing apart from reputation being tarnished. China has developed this extraordinary set of influence and infrastructure around the world. And that really made me sit up and think. And I think those are the kind of things that you can put in front of youngsters that will actually challenge some of the preconceptions that they receive from other sources. So I think that the idea of coming into school for someone with real passion and expertise, coming into school and talking about these things and presenting some of these really remarkable facts and statistics and points of view is the way to go. And as you say, it's going to, in the moment, it will hopefully engage and interest quite a wide spectrum of youngsters. So maybe next time they hear something about China on the news, they will sort of think about, oh, how does that relate to what I've heard in school? And for one or two, as you said, it may actually really fire them up to want to learn more and to get involved. And perhaps your organisation can be a sort of pathway for students to access means of learning much more about China than is perhaps available through the normal school education curriculum.
Thank you. That's really helpful. You mentioned the Belt and Road Initiative there, and that was a brainchild of President Xi Jinping. And I was invited in 2015 to a small gathering. Literally, there were 12 of us from the UK who were invited. I was the only woman, and I think the only Mandarin speaker. Gordon Brown was the sort of counterpart to President Xi. And Gordon Brown, so our former Prime Minister, said to President Xi, "Thank you so much for this Belt and Road Initiative. It will be the economic driver for the world for the next 30 years. And it's true what you say. What has America sort of taken away from Iraq and Afghanistan, whereas China has created lots of links and it's building not only its own economy, whilst at the same time supporting the economies of some of these rather unstable politically borders and neighboring countries. So in a sense, it's a very sensible initiative, but it's promoting growth at the same time as actually forging relationships with other countries, where at a time like this, we all need friends. I know it's a controversial initiative in some scenarios, but actually understanding what's going on and how that is working in China's favour is probably a really good thing to be aware of.
Definitely. I mean, I think the default position is to see it as a threat to economic interests of the West, which in some ways it is. It's a real challenge to Western democracies, but we won't deal with that challenge unless we understand it in the first instance, learn more about it, and then understand the thinking behind it in order to work out how we as a set of Western nations respond. And
of course, it's very important that we don't confuse the politics of a country with all the people in it and then diss everybody. I cannot write off a whole nation, and certainly a nation that's 1.4 billion people. And certainly when we've run some summer camps in the past through Engage with China, and we have seen how local kids here, and I'm based in Worcester, and we had some local school children from here join us at the camps. And young people, they're not interested in politics. They just want to be kids together and play football and do some music together and learn about culture and just have fun. And I feel we've got to get back into a situation where there is an opportunity for that kind of dialogue in a space that has no backdrop of the geopolitical tension that we're working against. So what were you hoping the outcome of my talk might be? Was it simply just let's get people thinking, or were you hoping that maybe some of your colleagues will say, Mark, how do I get in touch with HJ? We need to do a bit of this in our schools, or where could we go next with this?
Well, the whole purpose of the kind of conferences that we run is it's a kind of forum for ideas. It's a way of putting some ideas which people might not have been exposed to before, and some different ways of thinking in front of them. And you know how it is when you go to a conference, you listen to 5 different presentations perhaps during the course of the day, and maybe you come back with 1 or 2 ideas to think, I really would like to go and do something about that. So it's really about, it's one of a number of different things that we were hoping to offer people, and hopefully one or two of them will be interested enough to follow it up and want to work with you.
Great. And how did you think it went? My part, and have you had any feedback from any of the other conference delegates there?
Yes, when we did the feedback, not on individual sessions, so difficult to sort of split things out. But I think the feedback was tremendously positive about the whole day. All the speakers, I think everyone really appreciated, and I could tell because I was sort of sitting watching with my conference organizer hat on, thinking, how's this going? And you can usually tell by people's body language how it's going. And I think people were really held in rapt attention by all the presentations during the course of the day, and that's usually a sign that people are very engaged and interested, which is difficult when they've all got busy jobs and a million emails to answer, and getting them in a room and exposing them to some different ideas for the day. I think they found it very refreshing, very engaging. So hopefully one or two of them will take that further.
Brilliant. Thank you. Well, I certainly, for one, was absolutely thrilled to be part of it. I learned so much, and as there is lifelong learning, I certainly took away so many ideas and inspiration from the day. So thank you very much for including me in that. And I hope that we will be doing some work together in the future. And good luck with all that you're doing in your very important role. Thank you very much for talking to me. I'm H.J. Colston from Engage with China, and this is Mark Fenton from the Grammar School Heads Association. Thank you.